The following text was written by Alfred White. His whereabouts are undisclosed at the moment, but he was willing to send me this in an email in 2005. Per our agreement, I was able to share it to the public. I worked as a whiteboard operator alongside the rest of the production staff for the BBC television series Jigsaw from 1979 to 1984. So I was present throughout much of the show's airing. Cleve Doug, now retired, was the director and writer. The show was hosted by Adrian Hedvey, a mime artist who performed several roles. One was a character named Mr. Noseybonk, who had a prominent nose, toothy grin, and offset circle eyes. Noseybonk always struck me as a somewhat frightening-looking character, but I never openly opposed his inclusion, since I was entirely in charge of the production. Otherwise, the show had a cheery mood, guiding viewers and puzzle-solving skills. So the cast was mostly friendly and inviting. There was never a moment where I dreaded my job. On May 31st, 1984, a week after the final episode had aired, I was invited back into the studio by Clark Andrew, the set designer. After some time, he chalks me into the viewing room, despite the fact that full production of the show had ceased, and most of the cast and crew was now packing up. He told me that he needed to air one more final episode of the series before it was too late. I nodded, somewhat confused, but I didn't question his motives. As usual, the screen started and the opening sequence began the episode, but by the end of the song, there was nothing, complete darkness. "What's this?" I asked. "What's going on?" Clark looked at me with a condescending stare and turned his attention back to the screen. "Do not question," he responded. Suddenly, there appeared Noseybonk, playing miniature golf. It was a footage from a previous episode, but the film turned shoddy and corrupted and had been converted into vintage black and white. I remained silent, as did the audio on the film, and continued to watch nervously. Oddly, however, the video stopped abruptly and the tape was ejected. Clark motioned me back outside, walked the viewing room, and gave me a farewell. When he drove off, however, my curiosity got the best of me. I went back into the studio and attempted to force open the viewing room door. To no avail. One of the remaining staff members suddenly approached me from the corridor and offered to unlock it for me. "There you go," she said. "Don't forget to lock it on the way out." Now alone, I peeked inside and grabbed the tape on the topmost storage shelf before slipping it into the VCR. I dusted off and sat near the door just in case I needed to make a quick escape. The film started once again, as Clark had previously shown me, but it continued further after the supposed ending point. At this point, a faint humming began, but the film remained quiet. The scene then changed suddenly, showing Noseybonk at a dinner table in a dimly lit room, a knife sitting beside him on the table. Noseybonk looked into the screen briefly before setting its head down on the table. The film remained this way for a good 30 seconds before it switched to a new scene, in which Noseybonk was now hopping backwards in a sack. Another scene merged with it, but I could not make out what it was, except that Noseybonks' mask was involved. Murmuring began, and some faint screams were heard. A quick flash of one of the cast members' faces appeared before the film ended and the tape ejected. I was relieved, but sat idle in my chair for well over a few minutes. After I mustered the strength to grab the tape, I tossed it into the trash can nearby, ran straight out of the performing studio, and drove off into the distance. I never returned. Not once. Not ever. I told my wife about the incident, but she was mostly skeptical. I have since decided to disclose information regarding the incident, considering how I have since experienced what I would call a normal life. Now, in note, this secret episode was eventually aired thereafter on a very obscure channel that was only available in localized areas in the UK. As a result, it went relatively unnoticed. In 2009, a video containing the episode was uploaded briefly to YouTube, but removed the next day. And in an internet discussion in 1995, claims were made that an entire alternate version of the episode of the series may exist. The set designer, Andrew, was reportedly one of the few who remained in the studio after each filming. Tapes labeled with peculiar codes were said to be found in its office, but were apparently discarded. He disappeared without a trace in 1985, the following year. Subsequently, another corrupted episode was reported to have been uploaded to a media site under a MP4 file, but the location of this file has been lost.